Oh, do you guys still see the slide?
Yes, I can see it.
All right, good morning, and thank you too for coming, and hopefully we'll have some more people join us, but if not, we will have the hold on, somebody's asking a question. Of course, this is how it goes. We will be talking today about psychological flexibility and just maybe some ideas about what we can do to help students have more of it. I'm Julia Reed with the Center for Counseling and Wellbeing, and you can reach us on the fourth floor of the NIE or UCO, CCWB. I don't even know our email. So my brain, I'm so sorry, everyone. Seeking psychological flexibility. We're just going to get started. So I put the one slide up, and I have no idea where this came from. I have this on a little sticky note in my office that just is a reminder to myself, like when we're faced with a really hard problem, we sort of have some choices. We can solve the problem, we can change how we feel, we can accept it, or just stay miserable. And as Angela and I were talking when we came on, like we're all just kind of having these collective sighs right now, and it feels like we're staying miserable. But I think as you hear through today, I think we are doing a lot of trying to accept it, roll with it, trying to make our way through this and come out better on the other side. And I think that we are. So we shall see as we go through this what you think. So psychological flexibility is a term that is used a lot in acceptance commitment therapy and other places, but it really is talking about how do we stay present? How do we stay kind of accept what's happening out for us? How do we change the behaviors that are problematic? How do we sit with the ones that are problematic maybe and sort of accept them and figure out how to work with it sometimes instead of resist it? So a lot of it, though, is really focusing on being in the present. And as we go through today, I think you'll see that what one of our challenges is thinking about how I am going to fail college, or I am always a failure based on history, instead of saying what's happening right now that I can work to change or to accept or to solve. So my goal today, I'm going to present just kind of there's kind of 6 components of psychological flexibility. And I hope that maybe you'll hear something in one of them that you might think, oh, that's something I can actually do when I encounter a student, or that's something that I could do when I am working in my class or doing the program or service that I provide. Because we usually, if we're doing something like this with a student for a therapeutic reason, we're going to break it down into a lot of really small parts over time. And we're going to give you just the tidbit of it today, and hopefully something will resonate. So why I'm always interested, I ask this question a lot because I think one of the burnout prevention tools is to stay connected to our work. And so why do you guys do what you do? And since there's just a couple of you all, I can call you out, right? So why do you keep showing up despite the demand and the pain and the agony of the work right now?
That's a really good question.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that that's the first question, right? And it's a question we can even ask students. But when we don't know that answer ourselves, when we're struggling with it, I do think we need to pause and reflect on that. Some of the research around trauma stewardship, for example, talks about reconnecting to the awe. And like, I remember when I was this brand new, bright and shiny social worker, how excited I was to wake up and show up for work and to kind of, oh, Dallas, you said you like to eat. There are good places to eat on campus, especially when they keep bringing things on for United Way. But when I can remember in my newest moments in my profession, the excitement that stirred in me every day, because I had all this knowledge that I was so excited to impart on the world, and I was going to go out and create change, right? And then what happens over time is we become a little bit more jaded in whether or not people even want to change. And so what that might look even for faculty is, do students even want to learn? And why did they even enroll in my class? And why are they even here if they don't want to be here? And so we can get a little jaded by those interactions when our expectations aren't met. And so sometimes I think we have to get those in check just a little bit so that we can reconnect to that awe and help people with their psychological flexibility, but really looking more, you'll see in a second, about helping people with their inflexibility. clicking, it's not working. So here's some of the reasons that we want to focus a little bit on flexibility. And especially I'm going to give you a couple tidbits about what we know about the research and efficacy in college students. But one is self-efficacy is conditional only around psychological inflexibility. Even people with low doses of psychological flexibility do okay. It's the ones who have inflexibility that really do not have this capacity to stay the course with self-efficacy. And when we're looking at college students, it's particularly detrimental in those first years of college. And so one of the things for me, when I think about our first year experience, we as a university work hard. I think individually different people are looking at kind of persistence and grit and resilience, but collectively we really aren't looking at that through a lens of this psychological flexibility. And so how are we, assessing that with students. As we go through this, I think you'll see maybe an idea that you could take away, because sometimes it's even just a single question about what's a way you solved that problem in the past when somebody's saying, I don't think I can pass this course, or I don't think I can do this work. I mean, something tiny that moves from inflexibility to flexibility. And then we know that the more I think I can't, those really do start to stigmatize me and root me in my capacity not to succeed. And so that can really have an impact on my self-efficacy when I continue to think about the inflexibility of the process. So this is what psychological inflexibility would look like, right? It would be me, again, I had told you about traveling backwards or traveling forwards in my mind, the stories that I might tell myself about my past failures or my future ones that I'm predicting, ignoring what I'm feeling in this experience, buying into all the unhelpful messages that I'm hearing around me, whether that's, statistically, you're a first-gen student, so you're probably not going to succeed, or you are a fill in the blank, so you're probably going to have this experience. And so being able to they're anchoring themselves to those unhelpful stories, only seeing one story, like not seeing multiple perspectives, not really knowing their values. And we're going to talk a minute about that. And then not doing what's important. And I say to students a lot, we know that you have the capacity to do this because you're here. You got admitted to a college. You have performed the work that it took to get here. Most college students at some point struggle with engaging in the work and staying the course, but most are able to succeed. So we know you have the capacity. So constantly kind of getting into that feedback loop around what they need to hear to help them understand that some of that is just a really normal experience. And when we do that, when we help create more psychologically flexible students, we see these things. We see a better connection to the learning. We see more self-efficacy. We see better well-being as a whole, not just academically, capacity to manage their stress, progress towards the end state of graduation, stay focused, finish the task. I mean, all of those things increase exponentially when people overcome inflexibility. And I think it's even as simple as a prompt on a board about an assignment. What was your struggle and how did you overcome it on this homework assignment? Or what is something you learned from the test that you just took? Even if you failed, even if you didn't perform at the rate you wanted, what is something that you learned going forward? So this is what psychological flexibility looks like. And we're going to go through each one of these really quickly and give you a sense of what that means if we kind of got in the dirt around it. But I do think, I don't know what everybody's rhythm is in the world. Like, I don't know in DSS, and I don't know what it's like. I think, Dr. New, are you a chemistry professor? I'm blanking on all my people, but I don't know what it looks like in those lanes, right? I know the rhythm of my lane. And so I think for each person on campus, when I talk around the issues around total well-being, is to figure out what is my role, not to take on more, not to become the person who does total wellness education in my classroom or in my, like for Angela and DSS, but to be attuned to the language I use, the way I present concepts, the way you're responding to concepts, the way you're choosing to embrace and value what you're doing, that can be something that is everybody's responsibility. So the first one is focusing on the present moment, even in the midst of the difficulty. So if you think about something that you did really hard, that you were really committed to, that if you thought about, some people have heard my story on my marathon training. If I only thought, I bought a ticket to a marathon before I had ever even bought shoes or run to the end of my driveway. And then as I started to work towards that, and I trained for a year because, well, I had to. But even as I'm doing that, there were moments that you have this, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm going to finish the marathon in a year. Well, that didn't help me in that moment. What I needed in that moment was one step up that hill. And then when I accomplished that step, then I could do the next one. And so instead of saying, I'm never going to do this, I'm going to focus on what I can do today to get there. And so that takes some awareness. That takes the ability to for someone to say, maybe pause a minute, you're thinking up here. We need to break this down into more manageable parts and kind of look right here at the lower level, because we just need to look at what's happening right now. And then the other phrase that I use with students a lot is sometimes we kind of got to roll with resistance, because some of that, I'm going to resist problem solving for you. You're going to roll with the difficulty and try to learn with it. And we're going to figure out how by doing that, we get through this moment. And then what people learn is that they do get through that moment. And then that enhances some of their psychological flexibility, because the next time that a difficulty emerges, they're able to say, you know what, just yesterday, if I tried to do that, I thought that I couldn't, and I actually did it. So I'm going to try that again today. I'm going to see if I focus again today. Back to my marathon example, I was really struggling with even the smallest of hills at one point. And so one of the people in my little running circle said, you know, what if you just focused on one step at a time, that on each of those steps, it's flat. Your foot is flat. That is not the hill with each step. And when I started thinking about that, that was so true. And then when I get to the top of the hill, immediately I realized I just conquered the hill, even though what I was doing was staring at pavement and focusing on one step at a time, because that was my present moment, right? The hill was future thinking. The present moment was right here, each step. And so how do we work with students to encourage them sort of to look down and focus on the pavement and say, quit trying to look that far ahead, focus right here. What's one thing you could do right now that would get you one step further into this difficulty and getting past it? The other part is values, and this is a tremendous piece of development for traditionally aged college students, and really for all of us. But this period of identity and what do I believe in and what do I value? The very bottom link on their life values inventory is a great assignment to give people, because it lets you see kind of overall what are my values, and then what we talk about is towards moves and away moves. So if I am deciding to pull an all-nighter with my friends and go down to Dallas and go to a concert, is that a towards move? Am I moving towards my values and my goals? Or is that an away move? How is that going to help me get to what I want? And so, but once we can center ourselves in our values, we can decide what are the towards moves and what are the away moves. But if we haven't really explored those values and we haven't started anchoring ourselves to those, we really don't know if I'm living consistently or inconsistently within my values. And so I think sometimes we do have some students who are coming in and really some of their behaviors aren't behaviors that even they thought they would be participating in. And when we start to ask about their values and what are you thinking and feeling around those, it gives them a chance to, one, identify what those are. And sometimes they're different than what they had in their experiences prior to college. But sometimes it's things that they've just forgotten that they really aspired to and ascribed to. And so getting them reconnected to those values is a really important thing to do. And I think for us as staff, there are things that when COVID happened where I kind of had to have this reset button, because I started to have some away moves and was feeling frustrated but not recognizing the away moves, and then really reflecting on, wait a minute, I am engaging in these behaviors and that's not even who I am or how I want to be, and what happened that I got here, and what do I need to shift to get back again to that present moment so that I am really behaving in alignment with the values that I have. And then I feel better as a person and I'm able to stay more focused on the course. It also means that we're looking, oops, I forgot. We're looking at some of the, we're making room for a new action. So we're saying to ourselves, I've been doing this that's not in alignment. I need to create space to get back into alignment. What do I need to do there? Which then brings us into this committed action. And that's me saying, you know what, I'm kind of going to do whatever it takes to reach my end goal, but I'm going to kind of pause and see, can I approach this problem in a new way? You know, back in the very first slide when it said, you know, one of your choices is to stay miserable. You can choose to keep spinning your wheels if you want. And, you know, I say to students, so I'm going to sit right here and watch you run laps and watch you try to solve the problem the same way. And when you feel ready to approach it in a different way, I'll be right here and we will join forces together. But this running laps with you and trying to do it the same way doesn't seem to be helpful to me, doesn't seem to be helpful to you. But when you're ready to approach it in a new way, I'm going to help you solve that problem. And I think sometimes that happens when I hear students say, well, I went to tutoring and nothing works. And so then when I ask them about it, they're really not trying anything new. They're going and they're trying it their same way. And they're not really paying attention to some of the people, whether that's faculty or staff members that mentor them, to a new way. And so sometimes being able to say that to students, yes, I hear you trying to solve that problem, but what I observe you doing is the exact same thing over and over. And then back to values, doing things that bring meaning. And you see on here, I put, even when it's uncomfortable. Most of the time, committed action is uncomfortable. Most of the time, we are more comfortable with our horrible way of doing things than we are with a new way that might be better for us. And you can make the list, you know, ice cream, smoking, not exercising, all the bad habits we have. We are often more comfortable with the bad habit than we are with trying to create a new action, because those are going to create some discomfort in the beginning. We are not going to be comfortable. And if you look back at my marathon example, I can tell you what we did is broke it down into 5Ks, 10Ks, halves in a marathon. The first time I ran the 5K, I almost couldn't believe it. When I sat down and reflected on my uncomfortableness over the last, I think it was like 8 weeks before I ran the 5K, I could hardly believe that I was the same person that couldn't run to the end of my driveway. And I was reflecting a little bit on how uncomfortable I had been and that how stuck I got in some of those uncomfortable moments. Like how in that progression, there were days I was willing to quit because I was so uncomfortable. But then when I sit and get past a goal, I was really just amazed with myself. And it made me feel like I could take the next step. And so even if we can say, I'm going to be uncomfortable. Learning a new skill is not comfortable. Learning a new way of doing something is not comfortable, but changing might actually bring me different results. And can I take on that idea of trying to get to a different result, because I'm not happy with the result that I currently have. The next part is kind of the self context. And essentially what that is most of the time we're kind of staying in this thinking self instead of kind of observing who I am and what I want to be. And so I get really rigid around when I'm thinking about who I ought to be, who I should be, right? That's where all these should have, would have, could have kind of concepts come into place. Instead of just pausing and being aware and saying kind of, you know, what's happening right now? And instead of me just thinking, let me observe myself and let me make some decisions about what I can do next instead of being rigid around my contextual self. This is one of the hardest concepts for students to get because we're asking them to think what else could be true. We're asking them to be flexible in their perspective taking. And most of us, back to that being uncomfortable, most of us don't want to do that because this feels safe. And then when you add on the layers of kind of the types of students that we work with, and maybe people who've experienced trauma, or maybe people who've already failed that course twice, or maybe people it's the first time that they haven't had a parent helping them through a process, it starts to feel like I can't be flexible. And it starts to feel like I'm absolutely out of control, and that being flexible and looking at different points of view feels even more out of control. So this is one of the harder ones to help students sort of embrace. The other one is around thought checking, and it leads right out of that self context. I mean, one is we talk about diffusion. That's the word that we would use around some of this thought checking, because what we're trying to do is not fuse to the words and images that we pick up from the world around us. So when I look at what is a perfect student and I fuse to that, that won't necessarily define my experience. what does my experience need to be into this? And that requires peeling apart some layers, doing some fact checking, right? Are those thoughts or facts? Because sometimes I have thoughts and it's a great story or it's a horrible story, but what the facts that are attached to it aren't true. So if we say to a student, have you talked to the professor about your struggle? No, I can't talk to the professor because if I go talk to the professor, they'll think that I can't do this. Well, did the professor say that if you come talk to them, they'll think you can't do this? No. So tell me how you got that idea that you think that the professor will think you're failing if you go talk to the professor. So again, the fusing to these ideas can paralyze us from doing any of those committed actions, from doing any of those observations. And so having these resilient conversations and fact checking, right? Let's check the facts on that. Brene Brown has the story I'm telling myself, right? What's the story you're telling yourself about this problem? Because sometimes that story, as it unfolds with facts, is much different than what I had imagined in my mind. But we don't do that because of feeling inadequate and feeling shame. And we need to create space where we aren't shaming and helping students realize that that's actually a resilient conversation when you'll have it. The other part is kind of acceptance and opening up, acknowledging that the struggle creates painful experiences, that the committed action creates feelings for me that I'm just not sure what to do with, and then normalizing that and then helping support that new possibility. And so there might be all kinds of ways that we help students kind of get to that point. So with all of that, I'm just curious, what are your thoughts now? What would you say to somebody else on campus, maybe your peers or your colleagues, around helping students be more psychologically flexible? And I talk fast. That's what happens in these tidbits.
I think demonstrating it as modeling that behavior is the biggest part, because you can tell me to do this, but if you're not actually doing it, if I can't see that, then I don't think you know what you're talking about, you know?
Yes, and I think on campus that we have this dance that we're having to do right now, the grown-ups, if you will, the non-students, I should say, that we are in some of these struggles ourselves. And so creating space for that behind the doors where the students don't have to see us be incredibly messy, but
Right.
letting them see us messy enough that we're overcoming, right? That we're being resilient and we're doing all the things that we just talked about being flexible, so that they can see that it is really, we're human too, but not doing it in such a way that we're saying, well, it's everybody's experience. Everybody's having problems. I don't know what you expect me to do about this, because that seems to be what we do when we get really frustrated. But you're right, Angela.
Dealing with it, just suck it up. No, that's not the best way to handle it.
Yes, yes. And I think it is so hard. We talk about that on our team, right? That working in the Center for Counseling and Wellbeing, there is an expectation when we're walking around campus that we sort of have our mental health in check. And, we are as human as everybody else. So how much is too much to say that I'm about to fall apart, or right? So being able to kind of mitigate that with your students and have some humanity and let them see your failures and your resiliency without acting like you are a victim is the dance that we do. For sure. Anything else from it? Dr. New, you have anything from your world? Well, it is hard. And again, we've got this recorded, but I would love for every staff and faculty person on campus to be able to sit back and take some inventory of themselves so that they're strong enough to be present to all of our students right now, because it is so hard. Everybody is in such a hard space. Were you going to say something, Dallas?
It's amazing what they'll open up to you about.
Yes.
So I brought one over to you guys a couple weeks ago that really needed somebody to talk to more so than I could do.
Yeah, it is amazing. And, faculty have this, Angela and I are in this unique position that we only see the students who make it to our door. And faculty have this wonderful opportunity to see so many more students and build so many more connections. And honestly, that has so much more value. And I know that students really have appreciated the faculty who have acknowledged the challenge and acknowledged the emotion and the struggle and said, it's okay, you're going to make it. We're going to get through this. And how can I help you? I mean, that just is a gift. And so I appreciate you doing that from your perspective.
It can
Especially-
be overwhelming though. What
Oh,
they
absolutely.
say. So,
Yeah. Well, just as overwhelming it would be for me to teach chemistry. Right? I mean,
yes.
we want to focus in our lane, and probably you didn't get a single class in managing behavioral health of your students. Right? I didn't have to take any chemistry. And so it is a tough, it's taking on new roles that we normally wouldn't have had to have before, as the world changes. And I think some of that change is because we have done such a great job destigmatizing well-being, that now students are good help seekers, but we didn't prepare the workforce for the students who are good help seekers. And so we're having to do some catching up. But I hope that faculty and staff also use the resources. We've got an EAP that gives 6 free sessions, even just to call and vent about, it doesn't have to be your problem. It can be, I don't know how to help my students. I don't know how to help them get through this. I mean, that's a good reason to call the EAP. And so we've got these resources that are sometimes underutilized by the staff and faculty on campus as well.
I have
But
a
go
really
ahead.
good friend that she likes to say it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Mhm.
I really believe that because I don't know anything about chemistry or counseling, but I have 2 resources right in this room that I can reach out to and go, chemistry question. Well, doctor knew.
Yes. And one of my favorite things in COVID, we have had so many more faculty consultations than I've had in the 7 years I've been here. And I absolutely love those opportunities because it's a win-win-win, right? It's a win for the counseling center because we might have been able to stop a student from, I want them to use our resources, but the demand is so high, we sometimes struggle with meeting it. So sometimes we can create an opportunity without having to use our service. The faculty sometimes learn some new skills, and that impacts a lot more students, and that actual student got what they needed most of the time. And so I just love the faculty consultations. I'm so glad people have been reaching out to us and asking, how do I help this student? This is something that they've said. And I hope that people do more and more of that over time, even whatever post-COVID looks like. I don't even know. I don't even know.
I am with you, Julia.
Yes. Well, I really appreciate you guys for showing up today. I know that it's hard to take time to do something additional. I really appreciate you guys coming and staying the course. And if we can support you at all, please reach out to us because we would love to.
Thank you, Julia.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. We'll see you next week. I don't know the topic or I would tell you. I'm so sorry. We'll see you all later. Have a good rest of your day.
You also.
Bye-bye.